Welcome everyone to How to Produce a Virtual Meeting, Little Logistics for Big Impact, and is brought to you by Madison College Professional and Continuing Education and Madison College Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. So you're likely here today because of your interest in learning some quick tips and ideas that will help you create engaging, productive, effective, and seamless virtual meetings and presentations. Our presenter today is Vicki Weber, who is the Executive Assistant to the VP of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement here at Madison College. Some housekeeping issues before we start. I am recording this session for distribution only to those who've registered for this webinar. So if you miss part or you step away for a moment, you'll still be able to see this presentation in its entirety. Also, remember to please remain muted as much as possible, just to limit those little distracting background noises and things going on. But feel free to communicate with us if you have a question or something to say, either via chat or unmute yourself and you can speak with us. And anyway, anything else, Vicki?
No.
Good to go? All right. And here is Vicki.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vicki Weber, as Patty said, and I'm the Executive Assistant to the VP for Equity, Inclusion, Community Engagement. And what that means is that I have one of those roles that I have one of those roles that has the line at the bottom that says all other duties as assigned. And as we went to the virtual world, I have become what I like to call a producer of sorts in producing meetings and trainings. And I just want to share a little of all the little details to make these presentations a little smoother. So if we go to the second page, and then you can see that also Patty is going to be my producer today. So just want to review the agenda real quick. So just for those that have just joined, because there was a couple of you hopping on here, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Vicki Weber, and I work at Madison College in the as an executive assistant to the VP for Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And as I was saying, one of my roles has kind of evolved into being a producer of sorts. And so what I want to talk about today for online meetings is to go over roles and responsibilities of a producer, just to give some context. Go over a producer checklist. I think this is something that you can walk away with in terms of having something tangible to take with you if there's some meetings that you're going to be producing. It'll give you good parameters to work with. And then I'm going to go over just a few of the producer etiquettes. And then I'd like to open it up. I kept this kind of short and sweet, really high level, because I'd like to talk about any questions you might have about producing a meeting and share any kind of experiences you might have had in different kind of platforms, etc. Okay, so we have something in the chat about an echo. Is that better? Not yet. Okay. Let's look at that.
I don't hear the echo. Is anyone else experiencing that?
No, mine was fine yet.
Why don't we just try and get everyone to mute your mics for right now? That might help. Maybe including yourself, Patty. Maybe that will help. Just one at a time here. Okay, so I just want to, like I said, I was just trying to make this a simple high-level interaction to give you kind of a big overview, and then some of the details that you can take with you as far as the checklist is concerned. So if we go to the next slide, what we're going to do here is Patty's going to put in the chat an app. This is for you to possibly take back to your group. This will, she's going to put a link to WooClap. So what we're asking is if you could use one word to describe why you're here to learn about producing a meeting. You could click on that WooClap and go to it. Type in, you know, maybe it's a word, maybe it's a phrase. What is your interest in being here? But keep it pretty short because we're doing a word cloud. Just to try and do it interactive. And again, that means clicking on the link that Patty just put in the chat and going to WooClap. It'll ask you the same question. You can enter the word.
So can you see the slide that's up there, Vicki?
I can, and you can take that
Perfect.
down now because I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the responses that we're getting. This is one of the tools that you can use, by the way, this among other things when you're producing a meeting, or maybe your presenter doesn't know about this tool and you can show it. So some of the things that you have interest in is to engage the audience, to learn for future use, to set, I'm not sure what that means, but always changing virtual. Oh, always changing, and then virtual, to learn, and then simply, and then meetings, best practices. Great. Okay. So I think that what you're going to learn today is going to be pretty on target. Best practices. Interesting. Okay. So again, this is what is called WooClap, wooclap.com. It does have a free version that's kind of limited to a couple of different, just like a couple of questions. So you could try it out. There's also other apps that I'm going to go over here in just a little bit. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. We're going to go on to the next slide, which is talking about roles and responsibilities of a producer. So being a producer, you're behind the scenes, you're making the presenter or the talent look good, right? So you manage all of the technical side, reduce any issues so the presenter and the facilitator can keep rolling. It's been my experience that having a producer is an important part of any meeting because it gives the presenter the ability to just focus on the content. A producer keeps up with all of the behind the scene issues, technical issues, and even just sharing the screen, like what Patty's doing for me right now. It can help the presenter to really focus again on the content. I also think that this is a skill that's helpful for anyone as a transferable skill. In my role, these skills have contributed to the success of our trainees and events while we've been working from home. So it's really an important part. So the producer plays a lot of different roles. One is, you know, you could call it assistant or co-pilot, helper, support. All of those are kind of synonymous. I have an established support role with Lucia Nunez, who is the VP for Equity Inclusion. But I've had to learn how to support in this environment, which is different. Examples of support are sharing my screen for videos, presentation, applications like I just showed you, keeping the participants connected via the chat, keeping up with technical issues, and then addressing any other behind the scenes issues that might arise. And it's always some weird random ones. So you also have to be a problem solver or troubleshooter. I don't always know the answer. Some of the things that I've learned for troubleshooting is, like, one of the first things is, it's kind of the same as, did you turn it off and turn it back on? My thing is, can just leave the meeting and come back. And a lot of times that takes care of a lot of resets most of the time. Another suggestion for problem solving is to change the guest or attendee in Teams. You might go over here to the show participants. I think that you might have access to that. And you can see on here that I've made each of you an attendee. And that way you have, if you came in as a guest, you'll have access to the chat, because sometimes guests don't, especially in Teams. And so, yeah, so I move all of that. And then also the attendees are listed in alphabetical order. Now, sometimes it's last name, first name, but that kind of helps to track your attendees. I also have, as far as troubleshooting, I have people to check their audio and video. Sometimes if there's issues with audio, video, you know, just looking at their system and then looking at the app that they're using, and from their side, those two things are help. It's tricky because sometimes you can be in the middle of a presentation, and so you're trying to navigate the presentation and keep focused on that and what needs to be done there, but then also handle these issues on the side in a seamless kind of manner offline that's not distracting from the presentation itself, which isn't always possible, right? Sometimes there is distraction, and that's fine. It's just a matter of trying to get ahead of it as much as possible. And then if you're hearing any feedback or echo like we did in just a little while ago, you know, just having everyone mute their mics, especially if we're in a presentation mode like such as this. It's important to make sure that your mics are muted, and so that there isn't any kind of feedback, or since we're working from home, maybe any fur coworkers or children coworkers that might be making a bunch of noise behind you. So, which happens. And then any of the behind the scenes stuff, and by stuff, I mean, again, everything that's involved in that of, you know, addressing any emails on the side, trying to address the chat. Again, I'll go into the different platforms in just a minute, but, you know, Teams doesn't have the function to chat like kind of separately with just one person, like some of the other platforms do. I think WebEx does, and I believe Zoom does as well. But there's still ways that you can still have offline conversations. And so just handling all of those little things. So if we want to go next, I think this is the real meat of the presentation. And this is the producer checklist. And so I'm going to look at things from the pre-session, during the session, as well as the post-session. So just going down the list of the pre-session, if you're, you need to make sure you're in connection with your presenter. It's good to have a pre-meeting to discuss some of these items, because the presenter might be really invested in, for instance, what platform that is being used. So there's, again, I've mentioned several platforms. You know, right now we're using Microsoft Teams. That's what I'm most used to using. However, Madison College supports Teams. We support WebEx, and we support the Blackboard Ultra Collaborate. And then, of course, there's also external apps. I'm sure there's a whole bunch more, but the main one that I keep hearing is Zoom. And I have been part of meetings that Zoom, you know, been part of Zoom meetings, but I haven't actually driven, so to speak. I haven't produced in one of those because it's not supported by Madison College. But I think all of them have similar functions, and they've all improved in the last year. I think they've kind of had to, but they're not all created equal. Like I've mentioned, you know, the chat function, you know, whatever I put in the chat here, everyone that's on this call can see the chat. Whereas like WebEx, you can actually specifically go to a specific person. So knowing the platform and how to use the functions within the platform is important. You know, is there capability of breakout rooms? Is there a whiteboard for interactive experience? Do you have a chat? Do you have poll questions? All of those things can contribute. And then again, like I mentioned, there's external apps, and there's way more than this, but we have the WooClap, then there's Mentimeter as well. Um, so finding the right platform and knowing the audience and the features to use will help you to figure out what the best platform is for you to use. And then you set up a meeting invite to send to folks to get the link to be able to jump on here, just like the link that you received. I created that in Outlook and the calendar, and on my Outlook calendar, it comes up as, you know, do you want a Teams meeting? Do you want a WebEx meeting? And again, those are because that's how it's supported in Microsoft Teams. I mean, at Madison College, but Zoom also has the capability of grabbing that URL, that link, to be able to drop it into a calendar invite. Then you're going to help review and rehearse the presentation with the presenters, or at the very least have the presentation so that you can see and anticipate how the presentation's going to go. I definitely suggest, if you're going to be a producer, making sure that the presentation, the presenter and the producer are on the same page as far as the flow of the presentation, especially if you're going to have more than just the slides. We have a question in the chat. I'd like to answer that real quick. Does Madison College offer courses or training for Microsoft Teams, as does for other Microsoft products? That's a good question, and one that, Patty, do you know the answer to that?
We do have classes in, oh, I do get it now. We do have classes in Microsoft products, but not in Teams. And they're through the continuing education brochure that we send out every semester. So Word, Outlook, Excel, but not Teams.
Okay, thank you. So there's the answer to that. Going further, like I said, it's really important to rehearse. I think that that's extremely important. And then having backup plans for any technology mishaps. And again, that's something you want to review with the presenter of, hey, if this doesn't work, what's our backup plan? Like, if we can't use this external app, if it's just not working for us, are you cool with just using the chat? You know, just being able to be flexible and shift with that is important. And then just like what Patty did today, she's recording this session. So you want to also make sure to determine whether or not a session needs to be recorded and for what purposes, and make sure that your audience is aware that it's being recorded and is on board with all of that. And then sending the information. There's something else I was going to say about recording. Oh, what I was going to say about recording is that the presentations that I normally am a part of are pretty, they're somewhat a controversial topic, or sometimes just a focused conversation, and we just want whatever happens there to stay there, kind of so to speak. The information to stay there, but the learning to continue outside of there. So we typically in the presentations that I give don't record. So you might want to consider that of who your audience is and what your topic is before you decide whether or not to record. Then just making sure you send presentation and other documents to the group prior to the meeting. This is helpful because it gives the audience a sense of what to expect. And in this virtual environment, that really helps to move the conversation along. So it also cuts down, especially if it's more of like a meeting where you have to digest some things before you enter the room. It cuts down on some of the use of the meeting time, which, as we know, these meetings, or you may have experienced these meetings, you don't really want them to go terribly long, because you get kind of fatigued of that. So we want to make sure that you have everything sent out beforehand, at least a day beforehand, if not sooner. And then just being prepared that not everybody will, of course, read the materials, but maybe they'll give them a chance to scan it or just have an idea of what's going on. Then during the session, I always say to log in at least 15 to 30 minutes prior to the meeting. Usually 15 is plenty. That just gives you a chance to get set up. And by setup, I mean to begin with all items. Make sure you open everything. If you're a producer, you want to have everything open on, hopefully you have a second screen, because that is very important in the production role, to be able to see things on this screen. You see me looking over here. I have a second screen over here, and have your actual presentation here in front of you. That's important so that you can see, you can always tee up what's next. If you have videos, if you have PowerPoint presentation, and then you can use the share screen function for the entire screen. I know it was asked, in fact, Patty asked this as we were planning for this meeting. Do you use an app? Do you just go to Word document, or do you use the share second screen? And I always share my second screen, because I've found in my experience with doing this with Lucia and the trainings that it's a lot more seamless if I use my second screen. But what I always do as a tip is that I might share my screen because the presentation is over here. But then if I move to a different kind of app or a video, say it's time to watch a video, I stop sharing my screen, pull up the video, make sure that's all teed up, and then share my screen again. Also making sure that you share the computer audio, because there's, I think even in WebEx and Zoom, you have to make sure that you're clicking to share your computer audio as well, so that your whatever video, or if you have an audio that you're going to play, that's shared also when you share. You want to check your participants. Again, I've been checking them here and moving any participants into an attendee status. Again, it just makes it a little bit more to where you have a good understanding of how many people are in the room. And then you can change anything about if they need to be muted, again, like we said, then that gives you a chance to see them there. In Microsoft Teams, if a participant joins after something is posted in the chat, for instance, earlier Patty had shared the WooClap link to do our little exercise to see what everybody was interested in. So anyone who has joined after that can't see that. So you might, if you're revisiting something throughout, you might want to repost. So that's something that I have learned. That also goes for any instructions. Again, if you're revisiting instructions, sometimes people are, participating in the chat, which is great, if there's interactive conversation. So if there's a couple of different parts that you want people to interact with, you want to repost the instructions or repost whatever link that you want them to go to. It just makes it a little bit, again, it's just a little bit more seamless, so that it's easy for the participants to actually participate. I found that with myself and Lucia, we found other ways outside of this Teams. Again, we can't do a private chat here, so we make sure that we either chat by our text messages to just have that one-on-one touch base of, hey, this is going kind of long, or we really need to shift directions, or I don't think we're going to have time for that particular piece. Any of those little details as you go, if you address them directly. And again, WebEx and Zoom and other things have the capability of reaching out directly to the person privately, but with Teams you don't. So we found other ways that would work for us. But I think that's important to keep that line of communication open between the producer and the presenter, and that's the main point there. And then timing. Timing is so important as far as presenting because we have additional pause times. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes I will be having, I had the presentation that I'm sharing for Lucia, and she's talking, and she might look over and see that it's still on, you know, slide 4, and I had already taken the cue because I know this producer, I know this presenter. I've already taken the cue to go to the next slide, but she doesn't see it just yet. Or sometimes she'll be like, you know, does anyone have anything to add? And sometimes it takes a few minutes to type up, you know, first to think about it, then to type it up, and then for the system to catch up and be like, oh, okay, it's posting, you know. So I always, my suggestion is to give a, you know, a count of 10, or just to set like a time frame if you're going to ask a question that you really want feedback on. You say, I'm going to give you about 5 to 10 minutes, or I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I mean, whatever your presentation time will allow. Making sure that you're communicating that very clearly to your audience so that you give them some time for them to think, for them to type, for the system to catch up. And you have to be a little okay with a little bit of silence in there, which can be uncomfortable at times, but it's really important to give the space for your participants to actually participate. And then finally, just a short, as far as the post session, a brief debriefing to see what worked and what didn't work. That's always helpful. That's how I've been continually improving and moving things along, like, oh, that didn't work that time, and why didn't work? And, you know, even if it's just a few minutes after the session, I think that it's important to touch base so that it helps you to learn, and both you and the presenter to learn, you know, what worked, what didn't, why didn't it work. And then the last thing for the post session, excuse me, is to just send any kind of follow-up documentation. You know, oftentimes you'll refer to things, documents that we'll send that to you later as a reference. I just suggest sending it out, you know, within a day or two after the event. So we will just move on. So I just, one of the other things that I wanted to go over real quick is with the producer etiquette. And, you know, like Patty did, as y'all all came in, greet people when they join and watch as people join, see if there's any issues, and watch the chat, see, just having an idea if you've met everyone, or if all the RSVPs, if you sent out an RSVP, if everyone is in attendance. We usually see personal conversations with the presenter, facilitator, you know, as some of that will still go on if you needed to touch base just before or whatever, but, you know, keeping that to a minimum, and certainly in a professional kind of manner. Monitoring, you know, the private chat, like we had mentioned. Always be the last one on the phone. So I always try and be the first one in, last one out, just as a courtesy. Be a participant advocate. I think this one's pretty important. Sometimes there can be a speaker, a presenter who might have missed something in the chat. So I think it's important to make sure that they're being advocated for. Of, oh, wait just a second, Vicki, you know, we have a question in the chat. And again, this is a timeliness too. You want to address it in a timely manner and what's appropriate with what the presentation is. So sometimes we'll be like, hold your question, we'll get to that at the end, or or, we might want to address this now. This really fits with what we're talking about. So kind of having an idea and a flexibility to be able to address those and advocate to make sure all the voices in the room are heard. And then just be present and be positive. As you can see, Patty had turned her camera off. I typically do that as well. Once I've kind of done the intro, make sure people see my face. I try to always at least have a presence so that people see who I am. I think that helps people to ask for help a little bit more. And then I usually do turn my camera off whenever the actual content is going on, and then unless I'm part of it, of course. And then at the end, I'll turn it back on and just kind of, like I said, kind of make sure that I'm the last person in the room, just like if you were in a regular room. Make sure that everyone's been heard. So with that, I am going to open it up. I realize that's a quick shot of 30 minutes of how to produce a meeting. And I know there's a lot more how-tos, because if you can get into some of those different platforms, and there's very, very specific ways to do things. And so we wanted to keep it high level to give you just some parameters. So I wanted to open it up to see, A, if you have any questions, and B, if there's anything that you have experienced that you would like to share. So I think Patty's going to lower the presentation now so that we can have more of an interactive conversation. If you'd like to turn your cameras on and share, like I said, any questions or anything. Patty, you're on mute.
Thank you. I do have a copy of the producer's checklist that I will be sending to all people registered, as well as a link to this recording.
Great. Okay, Renee has asked, can you elaborate on the other tool you mentioned besides WooClap? Yes, I can. It's called Mentimeter. And it is kind of a polling tool of sorts, very similar to what I had with WooClap. There's the capability of doing a word cloud. You can do open-ended questions. You can do multiple choice for a fun polling type thing. So yeah, and I'm sure there's many others that I'm just not aware of, but those are the two that I have used at this point. Great. Is there anyone else that has a question? Feel free to just speak up or write it in the chat.
Okay, can I just speak up, because it was going to be a long question.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I'm a Teams user.
Okay.
And you mentioned that when you invited us in as guests, but then you changed this to attendees.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that in Teams? Because I did little tutorial, just the free online tutorials about different users. You have your owners, you have your members, and you have your guests. I haven't seen how you can make them to an attendee, because the guests, what a guest can do is limited, on a meeting and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, how do you do that?
That's a great question. And if you go to, can you see the participants at the top?
Oh yeah, for sure. The two little heads.
Right. So if you go to that, and you can see that I am the presenter and Patty is also a presenter, right? And then I moved everyone else down to attendees. And so if you look at, I'm going to use Oana. Is that how I pronounce it? Oana. I'm going to use her as an example. So if you look at her, you see her nice little picture and her name. And if you go all the way over where the three little dots are for more options, you click on that. And you may not have this feature right now as an attendee, but if you're running the meeting, if you're the presenter, when you click on that, the top option will be to make someone an attendee. Oh no, it's sorry, second from the bottom. So I could make each of you a presenter right now, and I wish I could show you. I'm sorry, I can't share my screen and do that at the same time, but it'll say with those 3 dots to make someone an attendee. And that'll change their status from guest to attendee, which will give them more functions, especially in terms of the chat.
And you can only change that during that specific meeting, right? Okay, all right,
Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome. Also, I just want to say one other thing. I think that you can, there's a couple of things with that as far as how people come into the meeting. So if someone was invited, like you all were invited, but you weren't invited through Outlook, I think that there's something with that. And then also whether or not you have Teams as an app and whether you have it as a web, if you're going in as a web application, I think there's differences in there. And I'm not an expert, so I don't know what those differences are, but I think those might make differences in how you show up to the meeting.
And I think Alana has her hand up. And maybe you just need to put it down if you want, if we answered your question, but if you have a question.
No, I actually have a question. Thank you. I was waiting for my turn patiently. Thank you so much. So thank you for sharing all this. I'm an instructor and I don't get a producer, unfortunately. But as I participate sometimes in committee meetings, it's nice to know all these behind the scenes work that is happening, and also as an instructor learn that and perhaps ahead of time do some of that groundwork. So very valuable for me. But I do have a couple of questions about Teams in particular, because I'm new to it. One is about the breakout groups. And I know how to assign breakout groups, and I think it's very important, but then how does the communication work between the presenter and the breakout groups? And then is there a way for each group to, I guess, share their screen and work in their own space? Or I'm a little unfamiliar with that feature.
Great. So first of all, just to answer the second part of your question, as far as sharing their screen, once you're in a breakout room, it's just like the same meeting. So it's just another meeting. So if you think of it in that term, so anyone in there should be able to share their screen. As far as interacting with the presenter or with the instructor, you're trying to oversee, say, 3 rooms, right? So you'll want to pop into each one of those rooms. This is just my experience. There may be other ways, but if you pop into each one of those rooms and maybe just do a quick hi in the chat, then when you go to your main teams, you have those chat and you can monitor what they're chatting about.
Oh, so you can see all the chat that is happening.
Yes.
Oh, that's a valuable thing to know. Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's the way I would do it. There might be a more concise way to do it. At this point with Teams, I know Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, I think, has the ability to pop in a little bit more seamlessly. But with Teams, it's a little more clunky with the breakout rooms. But I found that that's the workaround for that.
Thank you. Thank you. One more quick question. I'm sorry. About as the person setting up the meeting, I know you have basically access to everything, but then can the presenter have access to everything as well?
Mm-hmm.
For example, share things or just in case? So 2 people at the same time can control everything?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That is true. So Patty is the one that shared her screen with my presentation today. So yes, because she is in a presenter status, she was able to do all of that.
I see. So 2 presenters. Thank you. That helps. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing all this.
Oh, great.
Very
I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. I also want to answer what's in the chat. Oh, Oana, were you finished?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So what was in the chat was, do you have any tips on how to end a meeting in advance of another one starting? It seems like we end at 2 and start another at 2. I think this is more of just a scheduling. I would make sure, for instance, I handle a VP schedule. So you might imagine that's a pretty full schedule. And sometimes it's really back to back to back to back meetings. So what I have been doing to give her, you know, a break to stand up every once in a while, to use the facilities, whatever she needs to do, I usually build in time. So I'll build in a 15-minute break in between times, or even a 30-minute break. I will, yeah, I just block the time. So I'm not sure. I don't think that helps you, other than that I adjust the timing of the scheduling of the meeting, because I know that does happen to her, to where she's ending at 2 and she's not done yet. They're still talking, because sometimes meetings run over, but that's how I handle that.
And I would say, similar to a face-to-face meeting, book the time from 1 to 1:40 instead of 1 to 2. It's no different. Just the way that we're communicating is a little different, but the scheduling is about the same as a regular face-to-face meeting.
Right, exactly. So this is very informational. What are your thoughts about creating a user group to learn Teams? Tips and tricks. I'm open for it. I'm not sure how that would look. I saw
I know we've got some.
there.
We have some within the college for instructors. There are some ongoing trainings for the community. It's a little bit tougher to do. As far as from a professional development, we may have some Teams classes going forward. They aren't in place right now, but it's good to know that there's a need for it and that there's interest in doing that.
Any other questions, or maybe just experiences you want to share that ties in with this topic?
I have questions, but they're like Teams questions, and I don't want to, you know, they're going to be specific to Teams, you know, that I have, and I know the topic of this episode is how to produce a virtual meeting, but I use Teams, so everything is going to be like a Teams question, so I don't, you know,
Well,
I don't.
it might still work across platforms, so why don't you go ahead and ask?
Well, so I'll tell you, I have a team created within Teams.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like 20 or so members in our organization. Sometimes in a general channel on Teams, I want to send out an alert for a meeting when we have different meetings, and I set it from the general channel up in the right-hand corner
Mm-hmm.
to schedule a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But I do it like that sometimes, and it just pops up on our channel on the general post. But then some people say they don't see it like that. But then when I go into the calendar and schedule a meeting and individually put their email addresses, they like it like that. But it takes a long time to individually put all those email addresses in. I would just like to, you know, have the group set up already and just send it out all to them at once. So
I do have a solution for that. So if you already have a team set up and all these people, you want to make sure that they get this post from this chat saying that you're setting up a meeting, what I would suggest is doing, when you're in the chat, if you start with that @ sign and start to type out the name of your team, then you'll see that will automatically be something that you can click on, and then you type out your message and then hit send, and that will go to, that'll alert everyone on that team.
So I do. I already set that up too. Like I've been playing with Teams. It's a tag, and
Yeah.
I tag, you know, the team, and then I'll put at whatever team, and it'll show up, and then I'll put whatever in. And some of them still say they don't get. That could be some of them just playing, you know, that I don't get the alert, you know. But
Yeah, I'm not sure how to troubleshoot that. I found it useful to do the at with the team name because people were receiving that. But some people are not used to checking their teams as much. So you might have a little bit of that going on as well.
and one more question, quick, is that, you know, in Teams, you know, you have with the three little dots at the top, and you can go into a large gallery, and that's if you have 10 people or more, you know. And usually we have meetings that are 10 people or more. But when I enable that and the large gathering, I still don't see everybody. I see more than the 9 that you get by default. And I wonder if that's because if they have their cameras off, it doesn't, because I think you can get up to 50 people.
Right. I think that's when they're having their cameras on. I think that's why.
What the issue?
When
Okay.
they have it off. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Rochelle, did I see you pop up a minute ago?
I think we were having a sidebar conversation.
Yes, sorry.
No, totally fine.
I'll ask a Teams question too. Do you know how to get when the side conversations are going on, how to turn the sound off so you don't have to listen to the beep come up every time?
Yes. So I'm going to share my screen for this one. This is huge. This is huge for me anyways, because there is a lot of, you know, other chats going on. So if you go here to the more options, you see I'm in chat, I'm in our meeting. If you go here to this and you mark mute, it doesn't always work, but a lot of times it does. And then if you left a meeting, so Rochelle, you were talking about a meeting ended at 2 and you're like, I'm done with that meeting. If you want to go ahead and click on here, you can, because I'm still in that meeting, you can leave so that you're leaving that chat for that particular meeting. Does that help?
It does. And while you're there, could you tell me what pin means?
No.
Okay, that's an honest answer. I can make it. Thank you. This was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I don't know what that means. I have not explored that one. I'm guessing that it's gonna pin your most important chats of like ongoing conversations closer to the top. That's what I'm gonna guess, but it's totally a guess. Okay. Are there any other questions or, like I said, experiences you want to share? Done before 2, woohoo! Yeah, and I appreciate all of the chatter in the chat of connecting outside of this. Yes, this is the perfect opportunity to connect and just kind of go through things. I am available as well. I know earlier Patty put my email address. I'll put it in again. I'll be happy to talk things through. I am by no means an expert. I just have done it enough times where I have some expertise and some experience to share. So I'd be happy to learn right alongside of you. Looks like someone's typing. That's what I like about Teams too, is it shows that somebody's typing. So just kind of wait for it, wait for it.
And I don't know if you saw, Vicki, while they're typing, the conversation on the right in the chat was about a user group. And I said, would not be a Madison College user group, but I could extend the invitation if somebody wanted to put that together to the people who were interested in this particular webinar.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. This is a good opportunity for networking like that. Great. Okay, well, if there are, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but that concludes my presentation. So thank you for all attending, and hope you have a great day.